this is the quote that we use. Diabolical forces are formidable. These forces are eternal and they exist today. The fairy tale is true. The devil exists, God exists, and for us as people, our very destiny hinges upon which one we elect to follow. Now, this is a quote from a guy named Ed Warren, who Ed and Lorraine Warren, they were like the only people, or he was the only person, forgive me if I'm wrong on this, he was like the only person allowed by the Catholic Church, who was not a priest, to perform exorcisms and things. And they used to go and do that, and they used to study demonic possession, and it's a terrible subject to study if you ask me. I just do not have, I just don't have it, you know what I'm saying? But they did. A lot of people would say that they're a hoax. You can find a lot about that, but many people say no, absolutely not. And this started to come to me. I was actually watching a movie that had something similar to what he was talking about. And Ed Warren had gone to this house, and he quickly realized, yeah, there's a big problem here. There's a big problem. And he's talking to the dad afterwards, and he says, something to the effect of, where do you guys go to church? Have you guys been baptized? And the dad says, yeah, we're not really a church-going family. And Ed Warren says, you should be. Because no matter if you believe in it, it's there. It exists.
Yeah.
And these diabolical forces are formidable. And so I say that not to cause, because we could all kind of hear a scary story, and we hear these scary stories, and it can kind of put a little bit of fear in you. But I'm going to talk a little bit more about kind of a different fear today. When I was a child, I was at my father's house, and we were just kind of laying around, and it was late at night. I think we were just trying to go to sleep, and I was kind of, I don't know why we were laying on the floor, sleeping on the floor or something. And it was in the dark, and I said, Dad, this is, kind of like, yes. I said, what's outside of space? He says, well, it's just space. I said, yeah, but what's outside of that? He says, I don't know, what are you talking about? You kind of get like, Dad's going, listen, I want to go to sleep. You're wanting to uncover the depths of the universe. It's just not going to happen tonight. But he was very understanding, but he said, what are you talking about? I said, well, outside of us, there's space, but I mean, it can't go on forever. How far is forever? How far does it go? And what's on outside of that? And then what's outside of that? And then what's outside of that? And that question always kind of sat with me. These are signs that I would be an apologist, right? When I was like 8 years old. My dad said in later years, when I asked him that question, he never forgot it, because he actually thought, this is where I'm going to be able to look back and know that my son went crazy. Not kidding, that is exactly what he told me. I think he and I were headed to a Jacksonville Jaguars game, and this was like 20 years ago, and he tells me this. I was like, are you serious right now? He says, well, listen, you said it, I didn't. You can't help the way it makes me feel. I should have asked him, so nothing told you I wasn't going to go crazy? What's the converse of that? And Jonathan's like, you on it. So, I'm going to get off track here a lot today, and I apologize, because let me tell you what happened. My whiteboard at work, I spoke to you guys about it. We'll put it up there. We'll put a piece of my whiteboard up. This is my whiteboard at work. I'm drawing, yeah, I know. This is like in A Beautiful Mind, where she goes out to the shed, and there's like red wires and stuff, pointing to different things connected. But no, I'm trying to organize the mess that's going on in my head. And I was reading through Genesis 1, and we have a page of Genesis 1 where I've done some, and it's a little neater, where I've circled certain words and underlined others. I think we did yet. So there's Genesis 1. I was doing some work in that this week. The page opposite of that is a blank page, and I said, well, I got to outline this somehow, this mess that's going on in my head. And so there's an outline of that. What happened was I've been studying this for a long time. I studied this in apologetics with a basic understanding of science. If you're going to study origins, you have to Remember we talked about a basic worldview. A basic worldview was questions: where do we come from? What is our purpose? What are we doing here? And where are we going? Where do we come from? What is our purpose? And where are we going? Now, there's a very, with us, that we would say, well, we come from God, and our purpose is to be with God, to serve Him, and to have a relationship with Him. So we come from God, our purpose is God, and where we're going is going to be God. The alternative is very bleak. Because if you don't believe, well, where do we come from? Nothing. What is our purpose? Nothing. And where are we going? Nowhere. It seems a little bleak to me. And yet Christians are painted as the ones that are closed-minded, right? I find that to be incredibly closed-minded. That we are just random things just kind of bouncing off of each other, and we are machines for nothing more but propagating DNA. That seems very closed-minded to me. Because we can't have that discussion if there's no purpose, if there's no creator and there's no purpose. Where you go, nowhere. And so as I'm thinking about these things for months on end, and for years now, and months I've been studying, and in the past few weeks I'm really diving into it. And then like last week, I'm getting into the weeds of it, and I'm reading, and I'm listening to a lecture, and it got to a point to where I had to stop the lecture. I'm driving down the road. I reached down and I stopped the lecture, and I said vocally in my car, God, I am not smart enough for this. I'm not smart enough for it. And some people, I know they're like, oh yes, you're. No, listen. It's like me saying, listen, I'm not smart enough to go, do brain surgery. All right. Nobody here wants me operating on them. Okay. So I understand my limitations, and this was a moment that I had where I understood my limitations, and I said, God, I'm not smart enough to do this. I need you to help me with this. I really need to rely on you for this. I can't sort this out. I'm not smart enough to, comprehend this stuff on my own. I'm not smart to sort this out. And that was something that kind of hit me, and I started thinking about that the rest of the day. Like it was in the afternoon, but I started thinking about that. And then at night, right before I get down, to lay down in bed, the last thing I do before I get to bed is I kneel down and I pray. And I realize all this stuff that's going on in my head, and I'm praying to God, and I say, God, I'm just not smart enough to get this. I'm not smart enough to talk about it, but I need you. And I need you to help me, and I need you to help me to be able to illustrate this for all of our people. I need you to help me be able to paint this picture so that we can see you more clearly, because that's the why, right? That's the why. It's so that we can paint this picture of our origins so that we can see God more clearly. That's what I was praying to God for. And knowing that I wasn't smart enough to do it. And as I thought about it, and I think about this story that I'm going to be telling you, the creation story, this origin story, as I think about that, it gives me this sense of fear and trembling. Remember, the Bible says that godly wisdom comes from fear of God. Wisdom comes from the fear of God. Philippians 2:12 says that we work out our faith with fear and trembling. That's what it says. And so I'm kneeling down and I'm thinking of this, and I'm starting to kind of grasp the depth of what I'm trying to study and what I'm trying to learn. And there's centuries of study and science. I mean, there's minds, probably millions of hours of manpower that have gone into studying these things. And I'm trying to just grasp this simple and basic concept so that I can present this. Now, if you were to ask me to talk about it with people, I could talk about it. I talk about it all the time. I get those snippets, and I love just thinking, listen, I'll go toe to toe, because a lot of people are just not informed, especially people that have certain arguments against Christianity. Remember, we always say that we're painted as the dim-witted fools that check our intelligence at the door before we come into worship, right? I see it quite the contrary. But we have to study these things. We have to learn these things. And so I'm thinking about that, and I'm just kind of have this sense of fear overcome me. I'm like, yeah, I I don't understand it, and I just want to be able to paint this picture. And when I did, and I thought about it the next day, I said, okay, it's almost like God was saying, well, here you go. Here's your basic illustration. And I do have a little bit of a prop today. I hope this is the right one. Hold on. Here we go. I'm getting there. Okay. So here's what I want to do. I just want to use this light as an example. All right? Nope, it's not lit up, I know. But it will be. I'm going to use this as an example. Now imagine for a moment, and this is only to illustrate this. I know this is going online, and somebody's going to see this and be like, that guy's an idiot, right? That's fine. I know this. From the get-go, I know this. But we'll do this simply, and hopefully a scientist will like be my friend, and we can have like long talks together, right? Because it actually hurts my status. So he goes, listen, ask your organic chemist friends about this. Look, I don't think I have any organic chemist friends. And I would certainly like to know who you hang out with, right? Like, ask your organic chemist friends. There's a man named James Tour that said that. He's really into organic chemist. But anyway, we're going to give this a shot. You know, I'm doing this all from memory. So just imagine for a moment that this right here is what is coming into an existence at the beginning of time. This is a kind of a predominant theory of the Big Bang. When we talk about time, most of what is going to happen in a moment happens in fractions of a second. I want to say somewhere around 10 to the negative 35th power. If you can even try and conceive what that would mean, but if you can, please let me know. It's a very, very small amount of time. And everything that exists is right here in this. Now, it's what actually was. It was much smaller. So imagine if you were to put all of us, right now, if you were to put all of us, our density, our weight, everything, all into this one light stick. And then we were to put the chairs and the building all into this one light stick. It's getting pretty heavy, right? And then we put our cars, every car in the parking lot, we put it in this light stick. Still pretty heavy?
No.
And pretty dense, right? I mean, imagine when you're packing something in your bag, you know, that suitcase you're trying to close, it gets pretty dense, right? Imagine the density of all of us, everything in this room, this building, all the cars, the trees, we put it all in here. Pretty dense, pretty heavy. And then we take all of the roadways and the rest of the earth, we just start putting all of it in this right here. We put every bit of it in here. It's pretty heavy, right? I mean, imagine the weight of the entire planet. And then we put the other planets, and we put the sun. We put our entire solar system. All the planets and their moons, we put them all inside this one little tiny light. And then we do the rest of the galaxy. Think we're getting pretty heavy at this point? Pretty heavy, pretty dense. We do the rest of the galaxy, and then we do all the other galaxies and all the other systems, all the other stars. Everything that exists goes into this right here. Everything that exists goes into this. The weight of that and the density of this. And all these things kind of happen. These things start bouncing around, and it goes from one extreme temperature where the laws of physics don't even matter. Because think about it. Do the laws of physics, do they actually operate when you're talking about that kind of density and that kind of weight going something much smaller than this? I mean, we're talking about something, listen, this is small, yes. But imagine the molecules that make up this mixture. Imagine the atoms that make up those molecules. It all fits right inside of something that small. And then what happened? It exploded. So that everything that exists comes out from this one singular point. This one single point. everything that exists. As we look at that, because there's a couple things we'll talk about, like when you saw the page of my Bible, there's this little drawing down at the bottom, because I'm trying to write this cartoon example. You can put it up there. And down at the bottom, conservation of angular momentum. Listen, when I tell y'all swimming in some deep stuff, right? You guys, I hope you have sympathy for me this past couple weeks. But listen, conservation of angular momentum, we can talk about that and why they're two planets. See, what it means if something explodes, then it retains that spin, right? And they're all going to spin in the same direction. But guess what? There are two planets in our system, in our solar system, that don't spin in the same direction. We could talk about those problems. We could talk about the fine-tuning argument, which means that nothing, all of the things that had to happen, gravity, light, speeds, everything, these laws of physics, nothing could be altered. Not anything, not to the smallest detail could it be altered, because life could not and would not exist. None of this stuff would exist. We could talk about this expansion of the universe that seems to defy the laws of thermodynamics. This cup of coffee right here cannot just stay hot forever. It had to get energy from something. It's hot, and if it does not keep that heat, if it does not keep that energy, it will dissipate, right? It's going to cool down. So with this expansion, this one explosion that happened with all matter from the singular point has exploded out, it's going to cool down, right? But it doesn't seem that we're doing that. We talk about these things, but here's what I'm trying to say, is there seems to be this battle in between science and religion. And it's been going on for a long time. It's been going on for a long time, so what I'm going to do quickly, because we're already running out, but listen, quickly what I'm going to do is have you turn to the Acts 17. We're going back to Acts chapter 17 on page 892. Acts 17 on page 892. Remember, Paul, as was taken, he came to Athens, and the people that brought him there, they left, and he was waiting with somebody else, and so he goes into town, and he starts teaching and preaching. That's just what he does. He goes to the epicenter of religious thought and philosophy, and he's going to go toe-to-toe in these sparring matches with philosophers and teachers and the great thinkers. And as he does, he uses a couple of terms that I want to point out. And so, starting in verse 22, remember last week we talked about that he was kind of giving jabs back and forth with the Epicurean and Stoic philosophers. The Epicureans believed in happiness and pleasure, and the Stoics believed in strength and self-denial. And he told him about Jesus' resurrection, but in verse 22. So Paul, standing before the council, addressed them as follows. Men of Athens, I noticed that you are very religious in every way. For I was walking along, and I saw your many shrines, and one of your altars had this inscription on it, to an unknown God. See, to have gods it wasn't a foreign thought to the people that he's talking to. But what he's about to do is he's about to hit them right where he knows that he can hit them. And he's bringing up that they actually have something that is to the unknown God. And he says, this is the God that I'm telling you about. This is the foreign God that you know nothing about. And it's a concept that maybe you haven't really heard of yet. And here it is in verse 24. He is the God who made the world and everything in it. All right, so this is a foreign concept. Because all those forces that he's talking about, all the things of this world, all the things of the planet, they were governed by a God. They were created by a God in many different ways. And this is what he's telling them is, no, there is one. And since he is Lord of heaven and earth, he doesn't live in man-made temples, and human hands can't serve his needs, for he has no needs. Now he's hitting them again. He's hitting these philosophers with something that they haven't, for one, they haven't really considered at this point. And two, he's letting them know, and I agree with you, because the philosophers, they kind of had this disdain for this idea that a God would live in something that was man-made. Think about that at a basic philosophical level. Because I really can't go any higher. But at a basic philosophical level, how much sense does it make, just like Isaiah talks about all the time, how much sense does it make that you created that with human hands out of stuff, you chiseled it, you formed it, it was formed, and now you're worshiping that which you made? Doesn't make any sense. And so at a basic philosophical level, Paul is reaching these philosophers, some of the smartest people in town. In what's called the Areopagus, that's where he's preaching, that's where he's teaching. It's where all the intellects got together, and all the philosophers and teachers, and everybody got together. And here he is standing his ground, going toe-to-toe with some of the best. This unknown guy coming in and talking about an unknown God, and he's going toe-to-toe, and he's sparring with some of the smartest people out there. He says, and this is God that made heaven and earth, and he owns everything in it. Because here's another principle that he's talking about, is that there is a sovereign God who has providence over everything. That there's not a bunch of gods. The creation story is not a story of like it was in Greek and Roman mythology, where there were wars and there were battles, and that's how things were created. We'll get to that in a couple of weeks when we start talking about the authenticity of the Word, the difference between the Bible and Greek and Roman mythology and other fables. But here he is. Here's the man. Here's this unknown guy. And he's standing toe-to-toe, and he's squared up with all these people. And what does he say? The one thing that cannot be objected to is he's the God who made the world and everything in it. And since he is Lord of heaven and earth, he doesn't live in man-made temples, and human hands can't serve his needs, for he has no needs. He himself gives life and breath to everything, and he satisfies every need. Listen to this. From one man he created all the nations throughout the whole earth. And he decided beforehand when they should rise and fall. And he determined their boundaries. Now here's what I'm going to tell you. And this is central to Paul's argument. This is the central key to Paul's argument right here in verse 27. His purpose was for the nations to seek after God and perhaps feel their way toward him and find him. So he's not far from any one of us. And we could go into an entire sermon series for that line and perhaps feel their way toward him. Feeling and finding and groping in the dark to get towards him and find him. So as we look at what Paul was doing, and he's standing toe-to-toe with the best and the brightest. Right? I get so excited when I see this, when I read the story. I could read the story 1,000 times and I'm going to get excited about it every single time. It's amazing to me that he stood toe-to-toe with some of the smartest and some of the brightest. And also I think that maybe there's some. So we look at what it means to us today. I want to take us back. To page 1. We're going to read again the most important line, the most pioneering, the most revolutionary line in the Bible. The most important line in the Bible. Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. If you find your truth in that, there is absolutely nothing that happens in the rest of the Bible that God cannot do. This is God's greatest miracle. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So think about this. In the beginning, God stands outside. He stands outside. Follow me for a minute. He stands outside of time, space, and matter. In the beginning, time, God created the heavens, space, and earth, matter. God is not confined by the laws that we are confined by. He is the creator. He stands outside of those laws. That's what he did. He created all of it. He created every bit of it. And you know what evidences we have to it? Other than our creation, I just want to say, as we look at Genesis 1:1, where it says, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, time, space, and matter. In Genesis 1:3, let there be light. Follow that story. Follow the story that I talked about in the beginning, where all time, space, and matter. In the beginning, everything. That space and that density and that weight, it was all here in this one little thing. And then let there be light. Anybody see any similarities in this? So this is what I want to say. So you're telling me that the people that wrote this thousands of years ago, they were so advanced. They were so advanced that they knew how this stuff could have unfolded, how it would have unfolded. That's what I want people to say to me. Do you want to tell me, and you can write some of these things down, do you want to tell me in Genesis 6 when we start talking about the Noahic flood, We start talking about that. When you start looking at the science behind such a flood. When you start looking at what it would have done to our rock formations, what it would have done to the shape of our, to the structure of our planet, what it would have done. The supercontinents that happened, how everything lined up perfectly, and then it all broke apart. Also, and going back to the writers of the Bible thousands of years ago, they knew that the flood was global. There's so much evidence, there's scientific evidence, there's evidence all around us to a global flood. And these people knew that it was global. They couldn't pick their phone up and check their app for where the hurricane was, right? It didn't happen. How did they know that? People didn't know if a hurricane was coming 100 years ago. How did they know it thousands of years ago when they wrote this? And we talk about how then the next thing they start putting structure to all of it, putting space in between the water and the land. He starts putting forms out, and then all of a sudden, guess what was next? Guess what living organisms were next? Plant life. You're telling me that they just guessed? That there's plant life, and then there's systems put in place. There's systems put in place, like the seasons. The seasons and days and nights, and they're all put together. And then, and listen to this, what's next? Animal life. I don't see how people can seriously look at what science has shown us and not see what is written in the Bible thousands of years ago and say, there's no connection. Right? And then after the animals, what did he create? Humans. I just point out in Job 26. Here's some other revolutionary stuff for you. In Job 26, he says he stretches out the skies. Sound familiar? And if you don't believe that that's what he was talking about, think about this. He stretches out the skies. Remember we talked about that expanding universe? He stretches out the skies, and guess what? And the earth hangs on nothing. The earth hangs in empty space. You're telling me that the writers, Job is the oldest book in the Bible, and you're telling me that he's just guessing? Huh? He was that far advanced? And 2 chapters later, in 28, chapter 28 of Job, 28:5, he talks about that, hey, listen, we grow everything here on top, but down below it's all melted. What? How does he know that? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Think about it. The weight of everything, and God stands outside of it. So this week, when I was praying, I was on my knees, and I'm saying, God, I can't. I'm not smart enough to do this. I can't do it without you. God, you want me, like you're trusting me to be the guy? I got to be the one to illustrate this? I got to be the one to paint this picture for everybody so that they can see you more clearly? And and I got that fear, that trembling, right? That fear in my heart. I can't do this without you. I got that fear of thinking that being in the presence of the one that stands outside of time, space, and matter is not governed by these laws. You talk about being unworthy. I'm unworthy even being on my knees and petitioning his presence. And that is why what I wanted to bring to everybody here is that we recognize we're not just talking about Santa God. We're not talking about ATM God, where we do good things, right? And he gives us back. We're talking about the creator of the universe. We should have the respect for that God, that fear and trembling when we go into his presence, so we can say, wait a minute, there's something different here, right? I'm not going into the presence of an idol. I'm going into the presence of the creator of the universe that stands outside of time, space, and matter. Remember this light, the density and the weight of everything that goes into it. The one that stands outside of that created us, and amazingly, he wants to have a relationship with us. Don't we serve an amazing, amazing God? I'm going to pray us out. We are going to spend about 30 seconds or so just in the quiet. Stand before the Creator and beg him, please. I'm begging you to beg him him to give us a fear and trembling when we step into his presence. That we completely have respect and adoration and awe of this almighty creator. Let's pray. God, we love you so much. We thank you for this day. Thank you for this word. Thank you for this ancient word, ancient scripture that you have given us. And it just is everlasting. It just can't be outdone. And thank you, God, for giving us understanding and insight. God, we need you, and we love you, we love you, we love you. And just as we bow our heads in submission to you as the almighty creator, God, give us fear and trembling. God, we love you, we love you, we love you. We thank you for this time that we got to spend with you today. Father, I'm begging you as we consider these things, as we stand in your presence, that we always remember you are the creator of everything. You stand outside all of which that we are governed with. We love you so much, God, and we beg you, as always, as we exit these doors and enter the mission field, give us clear eyes and full hearts. We say these things in Jesus' most holy name. Amen.